Why would we call CTO if we have a dead body on the boat?
Important thing, right? We don't know how Nolan Wells died. No one here is saying we know. But what we do know is Morgan, Jax, and Warren had nothing whatsoever to do with Nolan Wells' death.
All right, after this, I'm probably going to take a couple days off because my brain needs a rest after the last couple of days. Now we know for sure that there was storage in the bow of the boat. All right, so now at this point, I am pretty sure that the Triton was there all day. They didn't switch out the boats. And I'm also pretty certain at this point that this is a real video because there's one single frame where you can see Bart's boat and you can also see the toes of somebody like dangling them off the water. So if the picture or video were AI, it would be a really bizarre thing for it to just kind of throw in. But there's zero question in my mind that this video has been altered. So then the question becomes, why would they alter this video? And the only thing that logically makes sense to me is to alter the identity of the two girls. Because if Carter is the boy in red, Wyatt is the boy in the American shorts, Bart's brother Brooke being the one in the navy blue shorts, and then Ike being the one in the teal shorts. Then we've got Warren up here with somebody in this red striped swimsuit and the girl in the teal swimsuit with the backwards hat. So in this picture, this would be Brooks, this would be Ike, this would be Wyatt, this would be Warren, which would leave this to be Carter. Now, whoever this is seems to be very cuddly with Carter. Like, too cuddly, in my opinion, for it to be like a mother or a family member. Thinking about it a lot from the timeline that we have been told, and what we haven't really been factoring in again is the party. Because remember, Warren said he went to the party, but instead of talking with all of his friends, he went upstairs to go talk with his girlfriend's dad. Now, those families are tight, so if that dad of Ava, if that conversation with the dad didn't happen, then they would automatically know that they were lying. So I've been saying for a while that the girl was somehow involved. And mind you, everybody's back on land now. They're getting ready to do the fireworks and everybody's swimming and drinking still, blah, blah, blah. So what's the excuse for no pictures at that party? They've explained it all away during the day, but at this point, they're all just being teenagers and having fun again, right? So I'm thinking that the brunette girl is Ava, the girl whose house they went to. And she's pretty close with Warren and the Pyrone family.
And they're full speed running. And then after that, I didn't see them anymore. I think you were on the boat. You can start from there.
Yeah, so after we planed off, Wyatt kept the boat pinned the whole way in. We ran into the mouth of Fort Bayou, where we came from originally. And we turned into Fort Bayou, went in the channel, ran probably 500, 600 yards into Fort Bayou. Wyatt had jumped out of the boat, put the plug back in the boat so access water. So water didn't keep pushing and filling back the boat.
According to their own words, they went into the mouth and then they turned and they went about 500-600 feet. Now, mind you, the party house is right around, but they go past it and then loop back around. However, Warren just admitted that at some point they had to stop and Wyatt jumped in. And even then, you heard him stuttering over the story. Like, it wasn't a smooth transition because I think they dropped her off. Which would explain why they would go back to this party, because obviously they can't cancel the party. That looks really suspicious. Then my theory has always been that the guys all like broke off and like talked to the parents about what was going on. And that's when they formulated their whole, we'll call her and then we'll call the Coast Guard plan. Remember, she is related. Somehow I can't figure out, but she is related through marriage to the lieutenant that wrote up the very initial report we've seen. Because remember how Morgan claimed that the picture of the boat stuff was circulating around Snapchat and stuff, even though Christine didn't post it to her Facebook page until the next day. Listen to this.
His mom was, what was he wearing? And so we were trying to remember what color his shorts were. We couldn't quite figure that out.
I said black.
Yeah, I think we said black.
I really did. He was wearing navy blue shorts.
Yeah, it was like dark blue shorts.
Dark. I just said black because I was trying to piece everything together and help out.
And so at this point, we're freaking out. We don't know where our friend's at. And the girl that took the picture, she was like, okay, well, I just took this picture of today. This is what color swim trunks he was wearing. And his mom asked for that to post on Facebook to say, if you've seen him, whatever, this is what he was wearing.
So remember, the girl who took the picture with the digital camera was on Wyatt's boat at the beginning of the day and then was there with them at night when they were having this discussion. So she had to have been there at the beginning and at the party at the very least. And we remember that the original shorts picture, well, that wasn't the color of his shorts, as we now know. So we also know for a fact that this picture did not get sent to Christine until July 5th, meaning that they had to have had that picture and then not sent it to her for hours. Because they also said this.
And so that's what we sent to her, or that's what she sent to her, because we're just trying.
So they corrected themselves. He said, we sent it. No, she sent it. And on July 5th, Christine said that they have been up for almost 48 hours straight. And then the very next post above it are the same pictures, but better quality. Why did it take so long to get these pictures to them? Oh, and y'all, now that I said that, I realize, so all of these pictures had to come from the same digital camera, right? Meaning this picture did as well. And since I've already proven that this picture had used AI to do something weird because, you know, there was no little bar here, only explanation for using AI on just this little part would be to obscure the reflection that was in this poll of the person who was taking the video. Or the pictures. Oh my God, yes. That makes sense. Love it when I figure that stuff out in real time for you on camera. So it makes sense to me that this photo video thing was altered to cover up this girl's swimsuit. Because let's face it, this swimsuit is the ugliest thing. It has like supposedly like sleeves and it's a tankini, but it goes like in a weird cut, but it's ugly. It's ugly and it's clearly not what these debutante beauty queen girls are wearing to a 4th of July beach party. So I'm like 70% sure that this is Ava. Oh wait, oh my God. Wait a second. Shown y'all guys before that there's 4 boats out here in this little cluster, right? But I'm looking at these weird pink lumps and stuff at the front of the boat, Bart's boat here. Is that a pile of life vests? Because I'm realizing there's not 20, 30 people on all of these boats. Like I'm seeing 10, 12 people here tops. Let's not forget what a full house looks like on these boats. Because even in this video at the meetup place, there's not 20, 30 people getting ready to get on these boats. I mean, the boat left at 9:56, according to the GPS. We got like 7, 8 people here, like 6 people here. And also, if they were legitimately needing to be towed and they were trying to get the water to run off, why are they all spread out on the boat? Why are they on the boat in general? Why didn't they just get off on land or get on another boat? Trying to get the boat to tip up and go planing, why do you have over half the boat on the front of the boat? These are experienced fucking fishermen. They know better than that. Yeah, I can't believe I've never thought of that before. If the boat was sinking, why are they even on the fucking boat? Yeah, and if it was so common and so easy to get, rides back with other people, strangers on Horn Island, why did they need to load everybody on the boat? Or were they yelling at Nolan to get on the boat? They didn't need to get him on the boat. And now that I'm looking at this, doesn't it look like Warren is on the phone? Could this have been when he was calling his mom 8 times? Also, one more thing that stuck out to me.
We called law enforcement. I was with Wyatt at the time after we left Jackson's house that night. I was with Wyatt and one person we were with saw that their location was headed towards Wyatt's house. And so Wyatt got on the phone with 911 and was like, hey, these people are on the way to my house or already at my house. My mom and my dad are there alone and they know nothing about this.
He stumbled over his words from beginning to end in that story, so I don't believe any of it. But the one thing that sticks out to me was the phrasing, they don't know anything about this. If people are heading over to your house, why wouldn't you call your mom and dad before you called 911? Because it sounded like he was trying to keep his parents out of the loop of this story, which as a teenage boy implies that you have something to hide. Just a lot of different things to think about, right? Oh, these little liars. I told y'all that Jax was the ringleader. I told y'all. He sat in this interview and he was telling stories about shit that he wasn't even there to witness. So let's break down some of the stuff that I heard in this interview. Let's start with Warren's first phone call because y'all will remember that Warren said that he was over at Ava's house for that 4th of July party when they all started realizing that Nolan was missing, and he called Miss Christine at 11 o'clock.
One of the first things I told Miss Christine Wells in the first phone call that ever occurred with anything to do with Nolan Wells being gone, because I was the first person to call Miss Christine about anything. First phone call, anything to do with Nolan Wells was me making a phone call to Christine Wells. And one of the first things I said to her, with multiple witnesses here, pull up the phone call if you want. She said, oh, well, Nolan's location is with y'all at, where the house we were at. And I was like, well, no, he left his phone with us. I told her this.
And yesterday, the same time that this interview came out, Christine Wells said this.
360 says that he's on land, and he was like, well, no, I mean, when we have his phone.
So both versions of the story say that Warren didn't tell her about the phone until after she confronted him with the 360. Now, Warren tells Miss Christine that he knows somebody in the Coast Guard and that he's going to call them, which is very fucking different than calling the Coast Guard, which absolutely explains why the Coast Guard came out and said at first that they had not received a call from the kids that night. The Coast Guard's initial statement said they weren't informed until 12:30. Then the Coast Guard later changed their story and said, oh wait, actually we did. And it seems to me that that first call was most likely an off the record to a friend kind of deal, which means these people freaked out and didn't call the Coast Guard until after all these people showed up at Jax's house. Which would explain why in the course of this interview it went from Warren called the Coast Guard to we did. Now, when the subject turns to how the family got the phone back from these boys, you'll notice that there was a couple slip-ups.
Warren, you weren't at the house, and so you weren't there when they came to get the phone and all that. So
now remember, Warren just said that he wasn't at the house when the phone was got. And then Morgan talks about getting a phone call from one of the people in Christine Wells' group.
And how did they get the phone back?
So I got a call from a kid we went to high school with. He called me just asking me questions. He saw people posting on Snapchat, like the picture that was circulating.
Except this picture wasn't posted until July 5th. So how could this picture have been circulating on Snapchat that night? But let's continue.
And he called and he was asking questions. He was like, where's Nolan? When's the last time y'all seen him? And then he was like, so where are y'all at? And I told him, I said, we're at Jax's house. And then Warren got on the phone, and I don't know. So they come to my house, right? And they kind of
hold on before we get there. Was it confrontational or was it just just trying to find? It was confrontational.
Yeah,
already?
Wouldn't y'all agree? Yeah, he was 110%. He was very confrontational.
And when did was this on the night of the 4th or the next day?
This was the night when this was before they came and got the phone.
So this is the night of the 4th, yes.
You guys are missing a part of the story. How did you get from Ava's house to Jax's house? Because Miss Christine is watching you guys on the Life 360. So suddenly she's seeing the phone leave one location and go to another. Of course I would be upset. And now all of a sudden Warren is there when the phone stuff starts happening? He's listening to the phone call? Now I need y'all to remember that Warren also said that the phone was in his truck on the first conversation, as we have from this report. Meaning if we were to believe Warren that he was not there when everybody showed up looking for the phone at some time in between 11 and 1 a.m., so then that would mean after they heard this angry phone call, Warren gets the phone out of his vehicle and puts it in Jax's house and then leaves.
There's probably like 10, 15 people in my house I don't even know. And they're all up in our faces, going crazy, asking where Nolan is, and we don't know.
And finally they get into Wyatt's face, and they're like, where's your boat? Where's the boat at?
Demanding his address.
Demanding his address and stuff like that. And he finally ends up giving it to them. We give them the phone. They have the phone at this point. Then they get the address to his house. Then they go to his house. And they're searching all over his boat, what I heard and stuff like that. Well, anyways, I don't really know much about that, but they come back to my house at around 1 o'clock in the morning. We called law enforcement. I was with Wyatt at the time. After we left Jax's house that night, I was with Wyatt, and one person we were with saw that their location was headed towards Wyatt's house. And so Wyatt got on the phone with 911 and was like, hey, these people are on the way to my house, or already at my house. My mom and my dad are there alone, and they know nothing about this. But Wyatt's mom actually, when they were looking at the boat, they were actually walking from the boat, and she came out and started talking to them.
Okay, so let me get this straight. Wyatt, Morgan, and Jax were all together. Warren was gone for some reason at this point. 10 to 15 people just barge into your house. Don't know why your grandparents weren't around. That might explain some things, huh? Guess y'all had the house all to your fucking self that weekend. But then they ask Wyatt for his address so that they can go look at the boat. Wyatt gives them the address. They start heading over there. Wyatt and Morgan get into a car and leave Jax's house. Somebody else that you were with that we aren't hearing about is tracking someone else's phone. I don't know if it was somebody who was with the group that they had access to, or if they were tracking Nolan's phone and they saw it was heading to Wyatt's house. And even though Wyatt gave them the address, and instead of calling his parents, he calls 911 and tells them, my parents don't know anything about that's going on. Can you send police over there? Now, mind you, it was about half an hour after being on the phone with Warren that Christine was able to actually call and report him missing. But she was having to go back and forth and go down to all these different agencies because nobody would fucking help her. And frankly, I want to know why all of this confrontation was left out of the fucking report. Like, if this family had to be removed from 2 different properties by the police, why is there no record of that? And in fact, it wasn't until after these confrontations that MDMR and Ocean Springs Police apparently had their little conversations about who was going to be taking over the case. Because remember, the Jackson County Sheriff Lieutenant told them that deputies had spoken with several friends that had traveled to the island on the vessel with Nolan, and that when they were left, he was in the company of an unknown female. So now, even though Warren had supposedly called the Coast Guard, all these family members are telling the police that the kid is missing. These are the people that last saw them. They're all like, we last saw him on the island. Still, the deputies said that they did not have reason to believe that there was any water-related exigencies or emergencies. Don't worry, y'all. I've got a lot fucking more to say about this stuff, so come back for part 2. I'm going to be immediately recording it because Warren fucked up pretty badly in this interview, and I'll show you why. Where we had left off, Warren had already called Miss Christine, and then they somehow ended up at Jax's grandparents' house. That's where they all stayed that weekend, and so that's why Nolan's keys were over there. They had to have been at the grandparents' house, who mysteriously never showed up during any of these confrontations. Somehow the phone had gone from the party that they were all at to Jax's place, and then Warren left after a phone call to Morgan. According to them, 10 to 15 people showed up and just walked into Jax's house and demanded the phone. Wyatt gave the address in which the boat was at. They all start migrating over there. Then Morgan and Wyatt and another friend are tracking their 360s and seeing that they're going over to Wyatt's house. Then they call 911 to tell them that the police are on the way to his house. Then they're searching the boat, and then they come back to Jax's house around 1 o'clock in the morning, according to him. Mind you, that's when they explain to the police about their friend being missing. And so then the report says at 1:38 in the morning, the Jackson County Sheriff's Office say that they spoke to several of the friends that were on the vessel with Nolan, saying that he was in the company of an unknown female. But Morgan, Jax, and Warren all claimed that they did not travel to the island on the same boat as Nolan. So who did they talk to? Because it sounds to me like they had told the police that they were on the same boat as him. Keeping in mind that this is what Warren told Miss Christine.
Named Katie. And so then it turned into, Katie is also missing. No one can find her. And the explanation of no one knows this Katie, like we've never met her.
And Tristan said this.
I was talking on my other buddy's phone, talking to Warren. He was dialing Coast Guard because he hung up the phone and was like, hey, this is them, bye, and hung up the phone. And that was the last time I talked to him.
Mind you, Tristan is friends with Katie. They are mutuals. I have confirmed this. So now that we've got that timeline fucking straight, let's back up to something that Warren said during this interview.
But if you're motivated enough to do it, yeah. Like, I made a phone call to my mom, and I had to call her like 8 times before she picked up because either her service was bad because she was on the back side of the aisle on the south side, or my service was bad, and it was just hard to get through.
Do y'all see that? Let me play it again slower for you.
Either her service was bad because she was on the back side of the aisle on the south side, or my service was bad, and it was just hard to get through.
Oh no. Not only did Warren confirm that his mom was on the south side of the island, but Warren himself said that if you're motivated enough, you can call somebody. I tried calling my mom 8 times. Yet this is what he said last time.
A little off the island, you have cell coverage, and even on the island, like I called my mom when we were on the island, it was fine.
So which is it? Did you call your mom with ease, or did you try to call her 8 times because you were motivated to get in touch with her? But Warren wasn't the only one to slip up, because listen.
And he's on the phone with Cito, and he's trying to get them on the phone. And as he stated in the moment, he's like, Cito's just asking all these dumb questions. I can't figure out what's going on. And so finally hangs up. And after the trim to the motor started to work again. So they manually trim it down by the buttons on the motor, trimmed it down, and some electronics started to come back on, and they got the boat to crank over, and they're like, all right, untie us.
So first off, Jax just proved that the boys put the phone on mute during the call with Cito. Because I've listened to the entire 8-minute call, and at no point does they ever say anything about them asking all these stupid questions. Then he said after they hung up on the Cito, that's when it started working again, and they said, okay, untie us, implying that it had been tied up to the other boat the entire time. But we see in this video that they are hauling the line back in right here as he's on the phone. See, you can see right here where the line is being pulled in from across the way where the boat is stationed. Meaning he had already hung up with Cito at that point, and he had to have been on the phone with someone else. And what we see here is, once again, we have an interview where they go into so much detail about stuff that doesn't fucking matter.
Well, I'm gonna go ahead and first off explain a boat.
We fucking get how a bilge pump works. We get it by now. Stop fucking talking about the bilge pump. What we actually want to hear about is the multiple stops that were made before ending up back at the grandparents' house before they even took the boat to the boat dock. We want you guys to explain how the Cito was canceled by the grandfather on the captain's private line before you guys had even hung up with Cito. That's why nobody believes a fucking word that you are saying. Because I showed y'all yesterday how AI had clearly doctored these photos. If you missed it, look, silver pole. Look, no silver pole. It's actually white. And if you look at this picture in the grandparents' driveway of the Triton, you will see that the little handrails are not leaning over. You will see that the rails are going straight up and down and not leaning, which is why I also suspect that the identity of whoever this is was intentionally covered up. Because first off, who wears this weird swimsuit thing? This is somebody who, if they were with them, would have stood out in a crowd. But this woman who's in a red striped swimsuit with a white baseball cap shows up in a lot of different pictures, just oh so obscured. Here she is again, handing out beers on Bart's boat. So I personally suspect that whoever that was in fact on the Triton, and they used AI to change her clothing and to obscure her identity. Because I think this was either Warren's mother or Wyatt's stepmother, which would explain the older female voice people have said they've heard on the Cito. Because otherwise, why would he need to call his mother 8 times? Unless, according to his own words,
If you're motivated enough to do it, yeah.
because remember, there is a 4th boat out there. 1, 2, 3, and 4. Holy fuck, I just accidentally stumbled onto something that literally is concrete proof. Oh my god, next video coming, oh my god!
Something new is happening around the Nolan Wells investigation, and this time it is not coming from a police press conference or an attorney standing behind a podium. It is coming from social media. A woman on TikTok has been drawing attention to details surrounding Nolan's final hours, questioning the stories that have circulated since his death and asking why certain pieces of information do not seem to fit together. Some of the claims being repeated online are serious. Some are unverified, and some appear to be based on information that was already circulating publicly. So tonight, we are going to separate those things. Because there is a big difference between a TikTok video saying something happened and investigators actually establishing that it happened. But there is also a reason these social media claims have attracted so much attention. Nolan's family is already seeking digital evidence from the very platforms where many of these discussions are taking place. According to reporting, subpoenas were sought for records from TikTok, Meta, Snapchat, WhatsApp, and Life360 as the family continues trying to reconstruct Nolan's final movements. So, the question is no longer simply, what is TikTok saying? The more important question is, could the digital evidence eventually confirm or contradict some of what people are saying online? That is where this story gets interesting. Nolan Wells was 18 years old when he disappeared during a 4th of July trip to Horn Island, Mississippi. He had gone to the island with friends. Later that day, he was no longer with the group. His body was found in the water on July 6th. And his family has continued to challenge the idea that the available evidence gives a simple explanation for what happened. An independent autopsy commissioned by the family ultimately listed both the cause and manner of death as undetermined, pending investigation, according to the family's attorney. The examination also noted a red discoloration in tissue at the back of Nolan's head, although the significance of that finding was not established. That does not prove homicide. It does not prove that someone attacked Nolan. It means the independent examination did not establish a definitive cause and manner of death. And that uncertainty is part of why every new piece of information receives so much attention. Now enters social media. A TikTok creator identified in coverage as Alexis has been among the people discussing the case online. Her posts, along with other social media commentary, have focused attention on Nolan's friends, their behavior after his disappearance, and questions surrounding the information that was circulating publicly. But there is something we need to make absolutely clear before going any further. A TikTok video is not an investigative finding. If someone says they discovered a missing detail, we have to ask, how did they obtain it? Can it be independently verified? Was it already publicly available? Did an investigator confirm it? Is there a document? Is there video? Is there a witness? Or is it simply another person's interpretation? Those questions matter because this case has already produced an enormous amount of online speculation. Some people have accused Nolan's friends of wrongdoing. Others have defended them. Some have interpreted social media activity as suspicious. Others have argued that people simply disappeared from social media because they were being overwhelmed by public attention. Those are very different explanations. And one of the most widely discussed issues has been the fact that some people connected to Nolan reportedly reduced or deactivated their social media presence. That became fuel for speculation almost immediately. But social media silence is not proof of a crime. In fact, people connected to Nolan's case have reportedly faced harassment and even threats as online theories spread. One of Nolan's friends retained an attorney after allegations circulated online, with his lawyer describing some claims as fabricated and saying a death threat had been reported. So we have to be careful. There is a real investigation. There are real questions. And there are also rumors that could potentially hurt innocent people if they are repeated as fact. But one thing that makes the current situation different is the phone evidence. Nolan's phone has become an important part of the family's effort to reconstruct what happened. And according to recent reporting, his family has sought digital records from several technology companies, including TikTok and Meta. Think about what that could potentially provide. Messages, account information, location information, where retained and legally obtainable, timestamps, interactions. Possibly information that helps establish when a person was using a particular device or account. That does not mean investigators will find a hidden message explaining Nolan's death. It does not mean social media will solve the case. But digital records can sometimes help establish a timeline that witnesses remember differently. And the timeline is already one of the biggest questions here, because there are conflicting accounts about what Nolan intended to do when his friends left Horn Island. One version says Nolan deliberately stayed behind because he wanted to spend more time with a girl he had met on the island. His friends have described him as refusing repeated requests to get back on the boat. But the woman he was reportedly speaking with, Katie McCormack, has become part of a conflicting account. Katie's sister, Gracie McCormack, disputed the idea that Katie understood Nolan was staying behind with her. According to that account, Katie believed Nolan was preparing to leave with his own group. That does not establish what actually happened. But it gives investigators two different versions of the same critical moment. And that is exactly why digital evidence could matter. If there are messages between Nolan and Katie, they could potentially help establish what Nolan intended. If there are messages with his friends, they could potentially help establish whether he planned to return. If there is location information, it might help establish where particular devices were. If there are videos or photographs with reliable timestamps, those could help reconstruct the sequence. And if none of that exists, that is important too, because an investigation has to work with what the evidence actually shows. Now there is another piece of evidence that has recently received renewed attention: the distress call. the Mississippi Department of Marine Resources released the recording from the boat, and investigators and media commentators have been listening closely to voices heard in the background. During the call, the person speaking reported that the boat was taking on water and requested a tow. At one point, the caller described being in approximately 31 feet of water, and according to analysis of the recording, voices can be heard in the background. Some listeners believe they hear someone asking whether Nolan is dead. Others believe Nolan's name can be heard. Those interpretations have not been established simply because people hear the words that way. But the recording itself is real, and that is an important distinction. The question is not whether TikTok invented the distress call.
There's one more piece here worth knowing.
It did not.
Because it complicates the idea that the friend
actually tells us.
She said he should be with them.
Who was speaking? Who
That's
was on
when,
the boat?
according to
What was
Christine Ernie's
happening
representing
immediately
both
before
sides,
the call?
has shifted
And why
from
does
waiting
the
for
background
answers
audio
to
sound the way
actively
it does?
that isn't currently public
Those
from
are
anyone.
questions that can
Sharpton's
potentially be
argument,
answered through
essentially,
forensic
was the
audio
mission,
analysis,
without ever
witness
going to
interviews,
court,
and other
but
evidence.
a real lawsuit
And now
filed
there
in
is
litigable
another
evidence.
question.
Not a
If the
leaked
people on the
document.
boat had
A
access
parent
to communication
describing
during
in
that
detail has
emergency,
produced a public
what
conclusion
digital
about how
evidence
he died.
existed at the same
No one,
time?
not the friends, not
That
who
is
were
where
with
the
Nolan,
TikTok
and
rumors
to their
and the
families.
actual investigation
Trump has
begin
been careful
overlap,
to frame the primary
because social media may be
the
full of
first was being
speculation,
told his son
but
had
the
chosen
phones
to stay
themselves
behind
may
on the
contain
island
something
at
much
night.
more useful,
In his own words,
a record.
wasn't confusion.
And until those records
It
are
was,
examined,
as
we
There's
may
so
not know
much
which
detail
parts of
about
the
stuff that
online
doesn't
story
fucking
are
matter.
meaningful
Well, I'm gonna
and
go.
which
Law
parts are
enforcement. I
simply
was with
noise.
Wyatt at the
For
time.
Nolan's
After we
family,
left Jackson's
that
house.
distinction
Enforcement.
could not
I was
be
with
made.
Wyatt at the time.
They are not
After
asking
we
the
left
public to
Jackson's
solve
house.
the case
Why
through TikTok.
nobody involved
They
has
are asking
clarified
for
that
answers.
distinction public
And
because
now,
it matters
with
more than
digital
anything
records
he's
being
about to
pursued
stumble onto.
and the distress
Go
call
interested
audio
in
under scrutiny,
is why
there may
none
be
of
an
that shows up
opportunity to
anywhere.
compare what people
In
said
right
with what
here
the devices
as he's
actually
on the
recorded.
phone.
The
So
question
we're on
is,
the
what
vessel
those
with
records will
Nolan
show.
saying that he was in the company of
And
an
if the
unknown
digital
female.
evidence
What it
contradicts
requires
even one
is
important
admitting
part of the
that
existing
a
timeline,
formal.
We've got
that could
Warren
force
up here with
investigators to take
somebody
another
in
look at
this
Nolan's
red
final
striped
hours.
swim sock.
One of
Because
the
the
first
next
things
question
I
isn't
told
what
Miss
TikTok
Christine
believes
Wells
happened to
in the
Nolan
first.
He needed to call his mother
It's
8
what the
times,
evidence says
unless,
happened.
according to his
But
own
there is a
words.
problem with treating any
On
new
her way
TikTok
there,
claim as
she
a
stopped
breakthrough.
at a hospital.
Before a
just to rule
social
out the
media
obvious.
post can change
Whatever comes
Nolan
out of a
Wells'
federal
timeline,
review,
somebody
whatever
has to
comes out of that
establish that
still
the
unopened
information
phone.
is
George, where we
actually
couldn't
new.
quite figure that out. I
That may
said
sound
black.
obvious,
Yeah, I think we
but
said
in a
black.
case that has
never
been
went
discussed
anywhere without
thousands of
it.
times online,
Put those two things
information
together,
can appear
and
new.
what he heard that
Who
simply because
mysteriously
someone
never
has
showed up during
repackaged
any of these
a
confrontations.
photograph gets
Somehow the phone.
wasn't their jurisdiction
A witness
either.
statement is
By her own
summarized.
account, at that
An old
point
interview
she was
is
left
clipped down
asking.
to
Guard
30
came out and
seconds.
said at first
Someone
that they had
adds
not
dramatic
received a call
captions,
from the.
and suddenly viewers
Warren told her
believe they are
something that
seeing
stopped her
evidence
cold,
that
that
investigators have
Nolan
never
had chosen
heard
to
before.
stay.
The picture that
That is why
was
the woman
circulating.
making these claims is important
Except this
to
picture-
examine
Oh, I
carefully.
mean, you know, when
Not because
we have
everything
his
she says is
phone.
So
necessarily
both versions
wrong,
know. But we also
and
know
not
for
because
a
everything
fact
she
that
says
this
is
picture did not
necessarily
get
true.
sent to.
Purpose
But because
of those
the only
letters
way to
as
determine whether
preservation,
her information
not an
matters
announcement of
is
an
to compare
imminent
it against the
unresolved
established
phone
timeline.
examination. But with
And
the
one of the
broader
biggest
forensic
questions
review
is
of
still the
digital
same.
A
evidence,
formal
What was
call
Nolan
that
planning to
opened
do
a case
when the boat
number
left
and
Warren?
triggered.
On Facebook to say, if you seen him, whatever, this is what he was wearing.
Nolan
Obscured,
chose
here
to
she
stay
is again,
behind.
handing out beers on
According
Bart's
to that
boat.
account,
So I
he was with
I
Katie
told y'all,
McCormack
told
and
y'all
did not
that
want to leave
Jax
the
was the
island.
ringleader. How did you
His
get from
friends
Ava's
reportedly
house
called for
to
him to
Jax's
come back
house?
to the
Because
boat.
Miss Christine
He
is full of the
refused.
person who was taking the video.
implication was that
Or the
Nolan
pictures.
had
Oh my
made a
God,
personal
yes.
decision to
already
remain there.
mentioned. And then
On
toward
its
the
own,
Ocean Springs
that would
Police
provide a
Department
relatively
instead.
straightforward
The
explanation
girl whose
for why
house
he
they
was
went to.
separated
And
from
she's
his
pretty
friends.
close with
But
Warren.
Katie's
Said
family
they had
has
not been
disputed that
informed
version.
until
Her
12:30
sister,
that morning.
Gracie, said Katie did not believe Nolan was planning to stay behind with her.
Island and
According to that
Christine
account,
has said
Katie thought
none of it
Nolan
will
was
break
leaving
her
with his
resolve,
friends.
and that the
That
family
difference is extremely
Roughly the
important,
same window Christine
because
made
those
her
two
own
versions
call to
produce
authorities.
two very different timelines.
because to Nolan's family,
In one version,
it read as a
Nolan
conclusion
knowingly
reached
stayed
before the
behind.
investigation has been
In the
sitting
other,
untouched
Nolan
for over a
believed
month,
he was going to leave
not
believe
because
with the
anyone
people
has
he arrived
refused.
else. And what we see
Neither
here is
version
once
should
again we have an
automatically be
interview
treated as
where they
proof.
go
That in mind,
But both
because
cannot
both sides of
describe
this
the
case,
same moment in
Nolan's
exactly
family
the same
and
way.
now the friends who
Zone.
And that is
I
where
don't
the
think there's a
investigation
mother
has to move
alive
beyond social
who
media.
chooses.
strip away
There may
the
be
emotion
messages
for a
between
moment,
Nolan
and
and
here's
Katie.
where the facts
There may
genuinely
be messages
stand,
between
as of
Nolan
right
and
aside
his
his
friends.
football coach.
There may
still
be
searching.
videos.
Both
There may
of
be
them have said
photographs.
that while they were out there,
There
They
may
get
be
into
location information.
into Wyatt's face,
There may be
and they're
witnesses
like,
who remember what was
came
said.
to him,
Those
A
are the things
lawsuit wasn't
capable
what
of
they were
testing the
thinking about.
competing accounts.
But he's also
And this
confirmed
is why
somebody
the
in the
family's
Coast
pursuit
Guard
of digital
and that he was
records
going to
matters.
call them.
The
That
family's
is not
legal team
Congressional
has sought
Black Caucus
information
this
from
week,
social media
asking the
companies,
Department of
including
Justice
TikTok
to
and
independently.
Meta,
Why are they even
along
on the
with other
fucking boat?
platforms.
Yeah, and if it was so
The
common
public
and so
does not
easy
yet
to
have access to everything those companies may possess,
I
and
think
we
it's
should not
Not
pretend
Nolan.
that a
They
subpoena
did.
means
She
investigators
told
have
him not
already
to tell
found
her not to
something
worry.
incriminating.
white baseball
A
cap
subpoena
shows
is a
up in a
request
lot
for
of different
information.
pictures, just
It is not a
also
finding
just kind
of
of throw
guilt.
in. But there's
It is
zero
not
question
proof
in my
that a
mind that this
particular
video
account
has been
contains
all
evidence of a
70%
crime.
sure that this is
It
Ava.
simply means the
Oh, wait.
information
Oh my
is
God.
considered potentially
Called my mom when
relevant
we were on the
enough to
island.
see.
You know, it was fine.
That
So
distinction
which
is
is it?
especially
Did you call
important
video?
when social
And the
media
only thing
is
that
involved.
logically makes sense
Because
to me
social
is to
media
alter
can
the
on
create
the
the
boat
illusion that
wouldn't have
every
simply
unanswered
left without
question
him.
already has
So
an
you
answer.
now have two
But
versions.
sometimes
Even
the
from
most
the beginning, it
important
was just like
evidence
this
is boring.
thing, and no
A
one had
timestamp,
facts, and they were
a login record, a location ping, a message sent at 3:47
fucking
p.m.,
more to say about
a video
this stuff. So
recorded
come
at
back for part
4:02,
2. I'm going to be a
something that places a person somewhere at a specific time. Those
a
details may
detail
not
that
make a
matters
dramatic
more than it
TikTok,
might sound like on its own,
but they can be far
because it
more
sits
useful
in direct
than speculation.
independent federal review
And there is
of the
another
entire
reason the phone
investigation.
evidence matters.
Congresswoman
Nolan's
McBath's
mother has
day,
previously
another
discussed the
version,
fact that his
from
phone
someone with
returned
no
to the
formal
mainland
connection
without
to
him,
Nolan's
and
family.
But
questions have been
Morgan,
raised
Jax,
about
and
information
Warren
on the
have
device.
all said
The
publicly
family's
There was a
legal
couple
effort to
slip-ups.
obtain digital
Warren, you
evidence
weren't
is therefore
at
not
the
simply
house.
about TikTok.
The next morning,
It is part
Nolan's
of a broader
parents went out
attempt
to
to
Horn Island
reconstruct
themselves,
what happened to Nolan.
along worth having.
That includes
because
social
the
media
threats aren't
activity
limited to
and
complaints
potentially
filed with the
information
nursing
held
board.
by technology
A
companies.
piece of evidence that
And if
both sides
investigators
agree
eventually
could hold
obtain
real
records
answers
that
about that
contradict a witness
digital
account
forensics effort,
that could
even
become
an incomplete
significant.
one, is not nothing.
But until those
Of her old
records are
Katie
released
McCormack.
or
But her
introduced
own
as
sister,
evidence,
Gracie
we cannot
McCormack,
say that they
has pushed back.
contradict
Nolan
anyone.
was already getting
This
ready
is where
to
the
leave with the
TikTok
group.
story needs
that
to
she
be handled
assumed the
differently
friends telling
from
him
the
to
way
get
many
even
viral
further.
videos handle
And it didn't come
A
from
creator
Nolan's
can
family
say,
at all.
"I found
the young
something."
became
That
one
is
of
a
the most
claim.
repeated lines
An
in this
investigator
entire
can
case,
say,
and one
"We
of the most
obtained a
content
record."
that happens.
That is evidence.
So the honest state
a
of
court
things
can determine
right now
this
is this
evidence
line they can
establishes
see.
X.
Back
That
on
is a
July
finding.
15th, both
Those are
sides
three
agreed to a
different
joint
things.
plea.
especially in the
Nolan's
middle of a
case deserves
chaotic
all
night
three to
with
remain
15
separate.
people.
For weeks already.
Now let's return
without
to the distress
controversy.
call.
The other
Because this is
is
one
the
piece
new
of
request
evidence
from the
that is
put
not
it.
simply a rumor.
That's two lies you
The
done
distress
told me.
recording was released
That
by the
account is now
Mississippi
sitting
Department
under
of
warning
Marine
as a
Resources,
reasonable response
and it
to a
has since
genuinely
received
dangerous
extensive
situation
public attention.
or an
The
attempt.
person
911
making the
because
call
it sounded
reported
like
that
he
the
was
boat
trying to
was
keep his
taking on
parents
water
out of the
and
loop
needed
of these people who said they've heard
The
on the
recording
CETO.
also
Because
contains
otherwise,
voices in the
why would he? Sure,
And
this would
this
be
is where
Brooks,
online
this would be
analysis has
Ike,
become
this
intense.
would be why.
Video was
People
showing
have listened to
in
the
real
same few
time
seconds
while a mother
repeatedly.
sat there trying to
They have slowed it down.
It was also where
They have
Nolan's
increased
family,
the volume.
alongside Ben
They have
Crump,
tried to
Reverend
identify
Al, this was
voices.
her child, she
They have
said.
attempted to
Her own
determine
flesh
whether
and
Nolan's
blood,
name can
and
be
there was
heard.
no version of that
Some
at
believe the
Mississippi Gulf
recording
Coast
contains a
Community
reference
College,
to Nolan.
with the possibility
Others
of
interpret
FBI
the audio
involvement.
differently.
Dad of
But unless
Ava,
a qualified
if that
analysis
conversation with the
establishes
dad
the
didn't
identity
happen,
of a
It's
speaker,
worth understanding
hearing a
that
particular
inside an
word is
already
not enough to
two-directional
prove who
legal
said it.
standoff,
That is
themselves.
especially
He said
true
we
with the
sent
recording
it.
made
No,
during an
she
emergency.
sent it. Then July-
There can be wind.
they weren't sure it fell under their jurisdiction.
Engines,
They pointed her toward the Coast
multiple
Guard.
voices,
Morgan claimed that the
people
picture
speaking
of the
over
boat
one
stuff
another,
was circulating
and
around
imperfect
Snap.
recording
any
equipment.
interview
So the
anywhere.
responsible
That's
question
not a
is
rumor.
not,
That's
does
Still not
TikTok think
undergone
that
the
is
joint
Nolan's
forensic
voice?
examination both sides
The
agreed to
question
in
is,
mid-July.
can the
Of the
voice
story
actually
say
be
that Warren
identified?
didn't tell her about
And
the
if it
phone
can,
until after
what
she
does that
specifically by
identification
name.
establish?
And he said
Suppose
on
the voice
stage
belongs
that
to
he'd
Nolan.
welcome being sued.
That
this
would
picture
matter.
in the
But it would
grandparents'
not
driveway
automatically
of the
explain
Triton,
how he
you will
died.
see blah, blah, blah. So
Suppose
what's
it
the
does not
excuse for
belong to
no
Nolan.
pictures at that
That would
party?
matter
They've
too.
come together and
But
ask,
it would not
in
automatically
unity,
prove that something
for the truth
criminal
of what
happened.
happened to Nolan Wells,
Every piece of
not as a
evidence has to be
one-sided
connected to
escalation
the
that
larger
came out of
timeline.
nowhere.
That is
It's
something
worth
that can
stepping
easily
people
get
around
lost
him to feel
online.
comfortable.
A single
That's the
detail
version
becomes
of him
the
that
entire
existed
story.
before any of
But Nolan's
a federal
case has
review
never
request
depended
is
on
sitting
one
with the
detail.
Department of Justice
It depends
and
on
the
a
FBI
sequence.
right now.
And the whole way in, we
Nolan was
we ran
reportedly
into the mouth of
separated
Fort
from the
Bayou.
group.
This.
A
It's
distress
easy to
call
lose
was
sight
made.
of that when the story
The boat
becomes
later
this
moved.
large.
Nolan
Lawyer
was
later
eventually
confirmed
found
were
in the
false.
water. And
From
investigators
there,
and the
someone
family have
filed an
disagreed
anonymous
over what the
complaint.
available
After they
evidence
heard this
means.
angry phone
The TikTok
call,
claims are
Warren
now
gets
being
the
added
phone.
to
Not
that
tell you
already
is
complicated
how that
picture.
first contact
But there
happened.
is another question
Was it
worth
Everything
asking.
you just heard.
Why are
It's
people on
this.
social media
The loudest
finding
new
details
developments
that
in
they
this
believe
case this week.
investigators
So
missed? There are
they come
several
to my
possible
house,
explanations.
right? And they,
Woman
Maybe the
Warren
information
referenced that
really
night
is new.
has since been publicly
Maybe it
identified
was already
as
public,
19
but had been
investigation.
overlooked. Maybe
That
the
complaint
creator
has since been
misunderstood
closed.
something.
The board
Maybe
found
someone
nothing
provided
his
her
phone's
with information
location.
that
It
has
showed
not
he
been
was still on
independently
land,
verified.
still on the island.
Or maybe the
Anyone
information
else
is
has
completely
been charged
false.
with any crime connected
We
to
cannot
his
know
death.
which
Nolan's
explanation
phone
is
has
correct simply
And
by
so,
watching the video. That
we
is
were
why
trying to remember what
verification
color
matters.
Dot was heading
And there is a
because the
broader
story
lesson
on the
here.
phone and the
When a
story
case
on the map.
receives enormous online
But letters
attention,
like that don't
the public
get sent
can
for no
sometimes
reason.
become an
By
unofficial
their nature,
second
potential
investigation.
evidence, because
Thousands
litigation
of
may
people
follow,
search through
have
old
already been
videos.
sent to the
They
friends
compare
openly inviting a
timestamps.
lawsuit he
They
says he'd
locate
welcome.
photographs.
None of
They
that tells
identify
us what
people.
happened to
They
Before
look through
you guys had
public
even hung
posts.
up with Cito.
Sometimes that
That's
work
why nobody
uncovers
believes.
something
review
useful.
whether the investigation
Sometimes it
itself
uncovers
has been
nothing.
handled fairly.
And sometimes it creates an entirely
Anyways, I don't
new
really know
rule
much about that,
then
but
has to be
they come back to
investigated.
my
This is seems to be
That
very
appears to
cuddly
be
with
where the
Carter.
Nolan
Like
Wells
too
case
cuddly
is
in my
now.
opinion for it.
The
Beneath
TikTok
everything else
claims have
happening in
attracted
this case
attention.
this week.
The family is
Not
pursuing
a new
digital
piece
records.
of physical.
The distress
Publicly,
call
for
remains
the first
publicly
time,
available.
exactly
Witness
what he was
accounts
told on the
remain
worst
disputed.
other. Directly
And
on the
Nolan's
heels of the
independent
most detailed
autopsy
public account
remains
Nolan's
undetermined.
parents have.
He was
That
110%. He was
there are
very
still
confrontational.
unanswered
When did
questions.
Blunt. He
But
said he didn't
unanswered
even
does
know their
not mean
sons'
answered
names, so there
in
was
the
no
most
way he could
suspicious
have
possible
defamed
way.
any.
This straight.
It means
Wyatt,
unanswered.
Morgan, and
there
Jax
is
were
one
all
question
together.
that could
Weren't
To do with
potentially cut through
fundraisers or
much of the
legal threats
confusion.
at all.
What do
If there's
Nolan's
one
own
thing
digital
worth taking
records
away
show
from it,
about
so when
his
you hear
final
that the
hours?
friend's side is now
If his
threatening
phone,
legal
social
action of
media
their own
accounts,
this week,
messages,
July
and
4th,
location data
the
can
posture of
establish where
everyone
he
still
was
fighting over
and
them.
who he was
There's a
communicating
date
with.
Get in touch
Those
with her.
records could
But
help
Warren wasn't the
confirm
only one to
or
slip up,
challenge
'cause
the
listen.
accounts
And,
that have
Before that
dominated the
statement
public
quietly
discussion.
changed.
And if
So
they
which
reveal
is it?
nothing useful,
Now,
that matters
subscribe
too.
to this channel,
Because
hit
sometimes
like
the
on this
evidence
video,
people expect
and
to
share
solve
it
a
with
case
family's legal
simply
team
does not
disputes that
exist.
characterization
The family,
directly,
however, is
saying
still
they've
trying
remained
to
ready.
obtain it.
crank over, and
And
they're like,
that
all right,
brings us to the most
unties.
important
So
development
first off,
surrounding the
personally
digital
suspect that whoever
investigation.
that was
Because
in
while
fact
TikTok
on the
creators
Triton,
are
their
publicly
friend being
discussing
missing,
what they
and
believe
so then the
happened,
report
Nolan's
says at
family has been
1:38.
trying to
This
obtain
case
the actual
reportedly
records
stretches
behind
back
the
over a
online
decade.
activity. The
That's
question
the
now
environment.
is
Dialing
whether
Coast
those
Guard
records
because he
will
hung up the
support
phone and was like,
stories
hey, this is
people have been
Bob.
telling,
Did.
or expose a very
Christine has
different
said publicly
timeline.
that in the weeks since her
And
son's
that is where
death,
this
she's
story
been the
gets
top
even
Weird
more
swimsuit
complicated.
thing. This
There
is
is one
somebody who,
detail
if they
that
were
could
with them,
eventually
would
tell
have.
us whether the
and
newest
described it
online
as an
claims are
attempt to
meaningful,
intimidate a
or
grieving
whether they
mother
are simply
into
another
silence.
layer of
The same
speculation.
sentences I called
It
the
is not
Coast
another
Guard.
TikTok.
Those are two
It is the
completely
digital
different.
Probably 500, 600
Because
yards
according to
before
court
Bayou.
records reported by ABC
Why?
News
Y'all see
and
that?
WLBT,
Let me play it again slower for
Nolan
you.
Wells'
Either her
family has
service was
sought
bad.
records from
Where are y'all
TikTok,
at?
Meta,
And
Snapchat,
I told them, I said, we're at
WhatsApp,
Jackson.
and Life
Wait,
360.
wait a second.
The
Show y'all
requests
guys
include
before that
messages,
there's four
photos,
boats.
Worth marking,
videos,
because it's going to
subscriber
put all of
information
this
and
back in the
location
spotlight
data
within
connected
days.
to Nolan's accounts
where the
and
house we were at. And I was
devices.
like, well, no,
That changes the
left his
conversation.
spot.
Until those
Or
records are produced
my
and
service was
examined,
bad.
nobody
And
outside
that
the
same appearance in
investigation can
Atlanta,
honestly
that's
say
easy
that
to
a
miss if
TikTok
you're only
creator has
skimming
uncovered the
headlines.
missing answer.
And
They had
But it
told
also
the police
means
that they
the
were on the
questions
same
being
boat as
raised
him,
online
keeping in mind
may
that
eventually
Personal
be
contact
testable.
and assume that
That is
counted.
a very different
Here is what
know nothing about this.
If somebody
He
claims
stumbled
Nolan
over his
communicated
words from
with a
beginning to
particular
end.
person at a
Simultaneous legal
particular
fronts.
time,
Nolan
digital
Wells
records
was,
may help
by every
establish
account
whether
from
that
people who
communication
girls are
happened.
wearing to a
If
4th of
somebody
July
claims
beach
Nolan
party.
was
So
somewhere
I'm like,
else,
started
location
realizing that
data may
Nolan was
potentially
missing,
help
and he
test
called
that
Miss
claim.
Christine at 11
If
o'clock.
somebody
Because
says
this
a
is where it
particular
stops
video was
being
recorded
about
at a certain
word
point
choice.
in the afternoon,
because
its
it's a
metadata
reminder of what
or
tends to get
surrounding digital
lost once a
records
case
could
turns
potentially
into
help
this many
establish
sides.
when
Sheriff
it was
Lieutenant
created.
told them that
And if somebody
deputies had
claims
spoken with
messages were
several friends.
deleted, investigators
my
may be able
service
to
was
determine
bad,
what
and it was just
information
hard to get
remains
through.
available
Investigation
from
had
the
barely
relevant
started.
platforms.
Since then,
None of this
the
guarantees
sheriff's Sheriff's Office
breakthrough,
has said it's
but
detected
it gives
Because
investigators
those two
something
things
that
do
social
not
media
produce the
arguments
same
cannot
outcome.
provide.
once
A
a
record
case
that
like
can be
this
examined.
eventually reaches a
And
courtroom.
there is another reason this
There's a
matters.
third thread from that.
But
The
we see
family
in
has
this
already
video
faced a
that they are
difficult
hauling the
situation
line
where
back
different
in.
pieces of
Green
information
stopped making
appear to
sense.
point in different
And somebody in
directions.
that house
said
One of the most
publicly
important
that the caucus
disagreements
gave the federal
concerns
government a
Nolan's
7-day
final
window to
confirmed moments
respond
on Horn Island.
because a lawsuit would mean
Authorities
depositions.
initially
It
said
would mean
Nolan
putting
appeared
people
to have
under
chosen
oath,
to stay
to a
behind
federal
when the
review
group
request,
left.
and a
Jackson
six-figure
County Sheriff
fundraiser.
John Ledbetter
But it's worth holding on
publicly
to.
said
Any of the
group
names you've
left
heard
without
40
Nolan,
times by now.
and that,
It's
from
Katie.
their understanding,
Every
he chose
DMR
to
and
remain
Ocean
on the
Springs
island.
police apparently
That
had their little
explanation
conversation.
became one of the
State.
central
The
pieces
two
of the
sides
public
also still
timeline.
haven't agreed
But
on
then
the
the
actual
account
protocol
involving Katie
governing the.
McCormack.
Dark blue argon said black.
Katie was identified as the
piece
young
everything
woman Nolan was
Me,
reportedly speaking
Morgan,
with before the group left.
And
And
Her
a letter
sister,
that
Gracie,
same week to the
disputed
Attorney
the
General
idea that
and the
Katie
FBI
understood
Director
Nolan had
requesting and
decided to stay
threatening to
behind
murder
with her.
witnesses and their families.
According to the family's account,
prosecutors have
Katie
said he
believed
went as
Nolan was
warnings
going to
from the
leave
friend's
with his
side.
friends.
Whether the people
That
issuing
creates a
them
critical
intended
question.
it that way or not. August
If Nolan
19th.
really intended to leave
His
with
family
the
has
group,
organized a
what
birthday
changed?
prayer rally
And
that
when
evening
did that
at a
change
Does it look calm? Does it
There may
look
be an
patient?
innocent explanation.
Or does it
People
look
change
he
their
meant
minds.
what he
Plans
said?
change.
He told Christine
A teenager
he
can
knew
decide
that
at the
letters
last
of
moment
spoliation,
to remain somewhere
formal
longer.
legal notices
But if
asking
Nolan did
someone
not
to
intend
preserve
to stay behind,
one of those
then
defendants,
investigators would
a
need to
man with
determine
no known
exactly
prior
when
connection
and
to
why
Nolan
his
Wells.
Asking
plans
questions, he
changed.
was like, "Where's
That is
Nolan?
where the phone records could become
When's the
important.
last time?"
Because
is a
a
case that's
conversation
gone
that
from
occurred
one
shortly
family
before
asking
the boat
questions
left
to
could
two
potentially
sides.
The
answer a
rails are
question
going
that
straight up
witnesses
and down
cannot.
and not
What did
leaning,
Nolan
which is why
himself
I
say he was going
a teenager
to do?
his parents
And this
describe
is
as
why
a
I want to
peacemaker,
return to the
someone
TikTok
who wanted
claims
the
carefully.
They would
The
express
woman
what
making
life
the
has been like
claims
for them
may believe
after
she
being
has
wrapped
found
up.
something important.
Now remember,
She may
Warren
have
just said that
information
he
that
wasn't at
deserves
the
to be
house with the fourth
investigated.
boat out
But
there.
until that
1,
information
2,
can be
3, and
independently
4
verified,
during the call
we
with
should not turn
Cito.
it into a
Because I've
fact,
listened to the entire
simply because the
8-minute
video
call.
has thousands
Talking
of
about
views.
race is not pushing racism.
That is
Us
especially
bringing
important
One of
because
the-
this case
One
has
person
already
we were
been
with
affected
saw
by
that their
misinformation.
location.
On the same
Officials
boat
have
as
warned
Nolan,
about
so
fake
who did
documents
they talk to?
circulating
Because it
online,
sounds to me like
while people connected to
She
Nolan
was like, "Okay, well,
have
I
faced
just took this
harassment
picture of
and
today.
threats
This is
15
stemming from
people
allegations
showed up at
shared
that
on
house
social
that night.
media.
Not officers.
One of
that's
Nolan's
running through this
friends
case,
even retained
and it's
legal
easy to
counsel
blur them together.
after allegations began
One is the
circulating
When we called the
online.
Coast Guard,
His attorney
why would
denied
we
what he described
do
as
the things we
fabricated
did?
claims
forensic
and
examination
said a
of
death
Nolan's
threat
phone
had been reported
to be conducted
authorities.
through the digital
So,
forensics lab.
there is a real danger
Drug
here.
treatment in the aftermath is
A person
different
can
from
be
theirs.
suspicious of a
What-
timeline.
Forget the
without
next video
accusing
tease for
somebody
a
of
second.
murder.
Let's
Those are
deal.
not the same thing.
Attorney
You can
Ben
ask
Crump
why
has
someone
publicly
deleted an
called it
account
frivolous
without
and
claiming they
unfounded.
deleted it to hide evidence.
So what do you
You
guys
can
think
question
about
a
that
witness's memory
Well, I can go ahead
without
and-
calling
People
that
around
person
him
a liar.
assumed is
And you
exactly
can
the kind
examine
of
a
detail
strange
that
detail
tends to
without
become
deciding
central.
what
Forensic
caused
attorneys
it.
were referencing
That
when they
distinction
issued
is
their own
important
warning this
if this
week.
investigation
Whether
is
you
going
think
to
that
produce
Named people
answers
say
instead of more
couldn't have
confusion.
come from them.
Now
And
consider
one
the
young
distress call again.
look, no silver
recording
pole.
is
It's
real.
actually white. And
The
if you
boat
look at
really
House at
did make a
around
distress
1
call.
o'clock in the
caller
morning.
reported
And
a
we
problem
called
with the
Nolan's
vessel
phone.
and
And
requested
that was the last time I
assistance.
talked to him.
Mind
And
you,
voices can be
Trayston
heard
is,
in the
guess y'all
background.
had the house all to
But
your fucking
online
self
attempts
that
to
weekend,
enhance
but then
or
they
interpret
asked
those
why.
voices have produced
friend
competing
group.
conclusions.
It's the most anti-racist
Some
thing.
people
People
say
in
they hear
Christine Wells'
Nolan's
group.
name.
And how
Some
did they get the
believe
phone
they hear
back?
references to
Young
Nolan
man,
being
incredible
dead.
young man.
Others
Referring to
argue
them
that
as
the audio has been
all-American.
Now,
manipulated or
6 weeks,
misinterpreted.
not one interview,
And that is
not
exactly
one
why
public
raw
statement.
evidence
seen
is
on
more
the
valuable
island
than
after his
viral
friends
captions.
left the island.
A caption
It's
can
still
tell you what
Yesterday,
someone
the
wants
same
you to
time
hear.
that this interview
The
came
original
out, Christine
recording
Wells
allows
said this.
investigators to determine what is actually there. That difference is enormous. Because once a caption appears on a video, thousands of people can hear the caption rather than the underlying audio. They are no longer
or to
listening
Mississippi
neutrally.
at all.
They are
is
listening
now
for the
facing
words they
federal
have already
charges
been
for
told are
allegedly
present.
Take a
That is
certain
one reason
individual
audio
that has
evidence
limited
should be
skin
analyzed
by-
carefully.
Get, you know, ride
And the
back
same
with
principle
other
applies
people,
to
you know,
photographs.
strangers on.
Way
It applies to
because of their
GPS.
race.
It
Sometimes
applies
the
to phone
non-oppressed will not
records.
share
Publicly,
It applies
6
to
weeks
witness
later.
statements.
Now let's
It
talk about the
applies to
phone.
TikTok.
thing that
Everything
they're
has
saying,
to be
"Oh, this is-
examined in
they wanna end
context.
racism and all this
There
stuff."
is another
Out here, this
development
little
that
cluster,
deserves
right?
attention.
But I'm looking at these weird pink
Independent
lumps and stuff.
investigation into
There, we
Nolan's
give them
death
the phone.
has not simply
They have the
focused
phone
on
at this
social
point.
media.
See us,
His family
get
commissioned
spotted,
an
try to
independent
beat us up
autopsy
potentially,
after
or even
concerns
worse.
remained
That's not
about the
I
official
told y'all,
findings.
he sat in this
That
interview
examination
and he
did
was
not
telling
establish
stories
a
about us,
definitive cause of
implying
death.
that it had been
The result
tied up
was
to the other
reported
boat
as
the entire
undetermined,
time that we have been
meaning the
told. And
available evidence
what
did
we
not
haven't
allow
really
the
been factoring
independent
in again,
examiner
all
to
these people
conclusively
showed up at
determine how
Jax's
Nolan
house
died.
She would explain why in the
That
course
does
of this
not
interview, but he
establish
was with the
homicide.
group that they had
It does
access
not
to,
rule out
or if they were
drowning.
tracking
It
Nolan's phone.
establishes uncertainty. And when you combine that uncertainty with
Is
disputed
watching you
witness
guys on the Life
accounts and
360,
questions
so
about
suddenly
Nolan's
she's seeing
digital
the phone.
activity,
Together and help
it
out.
becomes
And so at this
understandable
point,
why
we're
his
freaking
family
out. We don't know our
continues
friends
to
at
seek
The
more
exact same
information.
time.
But there is
Sit
a
with that
point
for a
where the
second.
public has
You
to
are a
step
mother.
back.
So it's done
Because
one
we are
time
not
with
investigators.
everybody together.
We do not
right?
have access to
The friends
every interview.
and that they wanted.
We do
in
not
her
have
words,
every phone
every
record.
stone turned.
We do not have
That's
every
a real
piece of
estimate.
evidence.
How the family
And we
got the
certainly
phone
should
back
not
from these
pretend that a
boys,
TikTok
you'll notice
video
that
really a
gives us
coincidence.
access to
It's the
information
shape
that
this entire
investigators
case
do
has
not
taken
have.
over the past 6
What
weeks.
we can do is ask reasonable
And then
questions.
Warren got on the phone.
And one of the most reasonable questions right now is, what will the digital evidence show? If the TikTok claims are accurate, Perhaps some of them will eventually be supported by records.
In the earliest
If they are
days after
inaccurate,
Nolan's body
the
was
records
found,
may demonstrate
the
that too.
And the girl in the
Either
teal
way,
swimsuit with the
evidence is
backwards
the
hat.
only thing
So in this
capable of
picture,
this
settling the
entire
argument.
case has been
And there is
unfolding
another
inside of for
possibility.
weeks.
The
Real
digital
criminal
records may
charges.
reveal
From two
something
separate
nobody
properties
currently
by
expects.
police. Where
A
is
message.
that?
The attorney has publicly
location,
suggested the
a
family has been
conversation,
unwilling to
a
hand the
photograph,
phone over.
A timestamp,
Cito
or
at that
perhaps
point,
nothing
and
useful
he had
at
to
all.
have been on the
That
phone with
uncertainty
someone.
is exactly
with what's
why the records
actually
matter.
sitting
Because
in
right
the
now,
official record
the
right
internet
now.
is trying to solve
Before
Nolan's
we get to
final
this
hours
week's
from
federal
fragments.
review request,
His family
there's
is trying to
context
Aren't
reconstruct
hearing
those
about
same
is
hours from
tracking
evidence.
someone else's
Those are
phone.
two
I don't know
very
if it was some
different
determine if
approaches.
a crime has been
And until the
committed
evidence
in
is
connection
examined,
to his death.
we should be extremely
Interested in
cautious
dragging
about
anybody
calling
for
any
showing
social
up
media
angry
claim
that
an
night.
expose.
What I am assumed
The woman on
happened
TikTok
between them.
may have
Not
raised
one
questions.
word of it comes
She
from
may
her
have
own.
brought renewed attention
going
to
to
information that
say they have a
deserves
guilty
examination. But the
Another-
word
Not
exposed
weeks.
implies
Nolan
something
would
has
have
been
turned
established.
19
At
this
this
coming
point,
Wednesday.
we do not have
3
enough
separate
evidence to say
developments,
that.
all
What
landing
we
at
can
nearly
say
the same
is that
time.
Nolan's case
all pulling
continues
this
to have
video.
unresolved
A federal
questions.
review request.
The final
A
timeline
parent's
remains
detailed,
under scrutiny.
specific account
The
Made it
family
into
has
a
pursued
narrative.
digital
They talk
records
about
from
us,
multiple
us,
technology
about
companies.
are not in dispute.
The independent
They're
autopsy did
documented,
not establish a
charged,
definitive
and
cause
moving
of death.
through federal.
You to
Witness
notice how
accounts
little
have
that
been
is.
disputed,
Dispatch
and social
logs
media
show
continues
the
to
code.
generate
Proof.
new claims.
Oh my God!
Now
Next
the
video
question
coming.
is whether
Next
those
video.
claims
Oh my
will
God!
survive
Target of what she
contact with the
describes as a
evidence.
smear campaign.
Because if the
both
records
professionally
eventually
and
confirm
personally.
something that the public has
on the
been
way to my
debating
house
for
or
weeks,
already at my
we may
house,
finally have a clearer
my-
picture
that if
of
the other
Nolan's
side is
final
confident
hours.
in their version
And
of
if the
events,
records contradict
a
those
courtroom is
online
exactly
theories,
where that
have a name
that will
attached to
matter
it.
just as much.
And I think that's a fair thing to be
Either
asking
way,
about instead.
Is
the
a
next
real
chapter
video
should not
because
be
there's
written
one
by
single
TikTok.
frame where you can
It
see
should be
Bart's
written by
boat
the
and they're on the way to
evidence.
his house.
And
Then they're
until that
searching the boat
happens,
and then they come
Nolan
back to
Wells'
Jax's
family
house.
Statements
is
or
still
else
waiting for the
it'll be
answer
met
they
with
have been
legal
asking for
consequences.
from the beginning.
As of now, specifically
What
calling
happened
out
to
what the
Nolan?
boys and
We are begging if anyone knows anything, his friends, strangers, please call the hotline because we will not be able to rest until we get answers.